Hi, I'm Allison, and I'm a hydrogeochemist and contractor for the Department of Energy Office of Legacy Management, or LM for short. LM has been charged with long-term surveillance and maintenance, workforce restructuring and benefits, property management, land use planning, and community assistance to over 101 former uranium mine and processing sites. 4 of these are on the Navajo Nation. Today we're going to talk about groundwater and how we sample groundwater at one of these sites not far from you in Shiprock, New Mexico. This is a groundwater simulator, or a really fancy sandbox. This allows us to show you how groundwater behaves. In this case, we have different sediments like clay or sand and gravel, and miniature wells. Groundwater moves in different directions. Groundwater is lazy. It doesn't want to go uphill, it would rather go downhill. This is true for both surface and groundwater. You can see that here in our display. The water runs from up here and goes down into this river. The top of an aquifer is called a water table. Wells allow us to measure the depth to that water table, which gives us hydraulic head. When we measure hydraulic head in multiple wells, it allows us to determine which direction the groundwater is flowing. Groundwater doesn't stay underground though. When the water table intersects the surface, groundwater daylights. This is how we get lakes, rivers, streams, or even puddles. And just like you can lose groundwater, you can gain groundwater. This can happen when it rains and water infiltrates. That means that water flows downward through the sediment until it reaches the water table. What has happened at a lot of the sites that LM manages is that ore was left on the surface. Ore that was treated with things like sulfuric acid, nitric acid, and other chemicals. These chemicals were used to remove most of the uranium out of the ore so it could be used for things like nuclear weapons or energy. What happens when the ore is left on the surface and it rains, the rainwater mixes with these chemicals and infiltrates into the groundwater. This is pollution. This is just red dye that I'm going to put on the surface. This is like when we have ore on the surface that's contaminated. Let's say it rains. You can see here that the dye begins to infiltrate into the groundwater. Here's our water table. When that contamination reaches the water table, it mixes with the aquifer and it can move. This is called a plume, and that's where we come in. So the plume will reach the water table, and then what happens is that it'll keep flowing in the direction down to the river, and eventually you get contamination in the river. Our job is to measure this plume. We can test for different things like uranium, sulfate, and nitrate, and things like pH or specific conductivity. This allows us to see how polluted the groundwater is. And once we know how polluted it is, we can talk about what we can do to reduce contamination or remediate the groundwater. Shiprock actually has 2 plumes, one on the terrace and one on the floodplain along the San Juan River. These 2 plumes interact across the escarpment, or the cliff that separates the terrace from the floodplain. At Shiprock, we pump some of this contaminated water out of the aquifer and onto the terrace. The water goes into an evaporation pond, where it is allowed to, you guessed it, evaporate. When water evaporates, it leaves contaminated sediment behind on a liner. You can think of a liner as a big tarp. This liner not only holds contaminated sediments, but it also keeps the water that is pumped into the pond from infiltrating into the groundwater. Using this chemical information, hydraulic conductivity, groundwater flow direction, and many other factors, we can begin to understand how the groundwater is behaving, even though we can't see it. After we've done all of this collection, we put together a report to keep the public and the stakeholders, that's you, informed. We also use this information to inform decision-making, adjust sampling plans, and allocate funding. We want to have the best information possible so we can make the best decision possible. We have a mission here at LM, to protect human health and the environment always. I hope this video was helpful in informing you how we execute this mission. And feel free to reach out to LM with any questions you may have. Hopefully we get a chance to see you in person again soon. Stay safe.